Welcome to Transform, Ignite, Disrupt, bringing you interviews and insights covering proven practical strategies to unlock your company's innovation potential. Here's your host, Stephen L. Blue.
Certainly, looking at your background and your achievements and accomplishments is pretty extraordinary. But the first question I'd have to ask you is how does a guy was it an English degree from Harvard? English major?
Yeah, I was an English major, yeah.
How does a guy like that become a technology guru?
Yeah, I was really an
They don't teach that at Harvard, right?
They definitely don't. They definitely don't teach that at Harvard.
Right.
Yeah, I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I never intended to start technology companies, and I'm actually an accidental entrepreneur as well. I never wanted to build a business. I wasn't one of those kids who had a lemonade stand on the corner or a paper route or started a small business out of my garage. I wasn't really interested in business or technology. So it's kind of an interesting story. And when I went to Harvard, I never took a course that really helped me in my work. I never took a single computer science course in my entire time at Harvard, and I've never taken one since then either. The interesting thing that's happening in the world today is innovation is becoming thinner and thinner, and it is easier and easier to access all the information you need to come up with an incredible idea that can completely change your life. And that's really how it happened for me. And when I started out, at the very beginning, I had this contracting job at a high-tech company, a tech startup in Southern California. And when I went to that company, I decided I should do a little bit of research about the industry. So I started learning about technology and data storage. And it was through that research and learning that I came up with the idea for my first software company.
And how many hours, how many days, how many weeks, how much research was that? It had to be quite a bit.
And that's the other interesting thing. We all read these books by people like Malcolm Gladwell, where he talks about the 10,000-hour rule and how Bill Gates and all of these tech titans back in this specific birth year, how they had opportunity to develop their 10,000 hours of expertise in computer science before the dawn of the PC era. That's just not true today. That's just a narrative told by storytellers and would-be analysts and would-be researchers and academics. The reality is I probably did maybe 500 hours of research and real work in the technology industry before I came up with the idea for my first software product.
Was your research in what was lacking in the market or what needed to be done better? Or I suspect it was more on the market need side than it was on the technology side, or maybe it was a little of both.
Yeah, I call it finding a value theme. And so what I saw in the industry at the time was this really big opportunity to provide disproportionate value in the data protection industry. So data protection at the time, backup and recovery, hardware and software, was about a $4 to $5 billion total industry, hardware and software industry. And on the consumer side, you already had products like TiVo and MP3 players that had recently shipped and were becoming pretty popular. And they took things like VHS cassette tapes and audio cassette tapes and took that data and put it on disk, transforming the user experience and providing superior functionality. And so when I was canvassing the data protection industry and doing a lot of research in that space, I thought the enterprise tape backup and recovery industry was ripe for disruption. And there were some other factors that were really important. When I was doing a little research about the economics of the industry, you could see that the cost of disk on a per gigabyte basis was falling much faster than the price per gigabyte of tape or optical storage, these other types of media that companies use. And so you could see that you had this shifting landscape in the media economics, and you had technologies on the consumer side that really took advantage of disk as a superior media. And so my idea was to apply these consumer concepts to the enterprise tape backup industry. And over the course of about a decade, we completely transformed that industry.
That was Delphix?
That was Avamar. That was my first software company. I was the founding CEO there, and we ended up selling the company to EMC for $165 million, and they went on to sell billions of dollars of the product to tens of thousands of companies around the world, and it created tens of thousands of jobs.
Wow! And then you went to then you founded Delphi.
Yeah, I was the founding CEO of Delphix. It's Delphix. There's an X on the end. And
Delphix,
yeah, and I ran Delphix as CEO for the first 7 to 8 years. We grew about 1,000% in the last 4 years, from 6.7 million to 67 million over the course of 4 years. And I've recently moved into the executive chairman role. And I wrote a book.
I saw that. Where is it here? Disrupt or Die.
Yeah, we hit three number one spots on the Amazon bestseller list, and it's really about sharing everything I've learned in building technology companies and multi-billion-dollar software products with the rest of the world.
That's as a matter of fact, I just published a book co-authored with Jack Canfield, and my contribution to the book was Chapter 2 on innovation, and we hit the 3 bestseller list in the second or third day, so I sort of know how that feels.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it really is, and of course, getting the message out, it's what it's like. I mean, I know it too. It's when you have something that works and something you've discovered, maybe something other people haven't had, within certain limitations like confidentiality and so forth, you want to share it with people.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to spill the beans on the frameworks that power Silicon Valley. I think there's just too much wealth and too much technical know-how concentrated in the hands of too few people. And it's creating an unstable overall environment for our economy and for our country and for the world. And so I think it's important to try and disseminate that information, to share these frameworks that really make innovation repeatable and accessible to everybody. And that's really the goal of the book.
What do you mean by it's causing an unstable situation? How is that so? Just because of the concentration of wealth and knowledge, or what did you mean by that?
Yeah, back at the dawn of capitalism, you had Adam Smith coin the term the invisible hand, and it set market prices and raised the prosperity for all, for rich and for poor. And we really saw those effects over the course of the last couple hundred years, and certainly the last several decades. The problem today is we have what I call the digital hand, and the digital hand has a very different type of functioning. The digital hand simultaneously concentrates wealth in the hands of the few while automating away jobs for the many. And so it doesn't create widespread wealth. And I think that creates a great strain on the country, on our political system, on our economics. And you end up with, massive income disparity. One of the statistics we quote in the book is if you take the top 10 richest people in the world in technology, just the high-tech titans, they're worth as much as half of the world's population, more than half the world's population.
Holy
So 10 people are worth more than 3.7 billion people on the planet.
It just doesn't feel right, does it?
Yeah, and where the concentration and leverage is increasing, you can see the power of the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Googles and the Apples. Their ability to drive leverage and really take advantage of this digital economy is incredible and accelerating.
Doesn't sound like a good thing, does it?
No, and I think we have to be thoughtful as a country and as a race, as the human race, about these high leverage effects that are developing because of the way technology functions.
Just switch gears with you for just a minute. You wrote something that resonated with me. I write a lot about culture, and I'm most of the major media outlets, particularly when companies like Wells Fargo and Uber and United Airlines does something stupid. I usually get a call to comment on it. But one thing that I've always said is you should hire slow and fire fast. You wrote once somewhere about quote unquote fire right. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, it's really if you hire people into your team, and I love that. I love the hire slow and fire fast. That's perfect. I have in my book I have a framework that I call learning slow and fast. But and it's the way I've been able to really master and take command of these industries when I had little to no knowledge or experience at the beginning. But what I meant by fire right, it's, when you hire somebody on your team, if they're not increasing your leverage quickly, if there's somebody who delevers you and your organization, you know that you have to fire them. There's just no way for you to build scale and to build a really strong team if you're not immediately getting leverage from the individuals who are closest to you.
Yeah, that's as you know, what most CEOs tend not to do, most leaders really tend not to do, is they don't want to confront their bad hiring decisions and do something about it. They try to salvage the situation. That's always a mistake.
Always a mistake. At the point that you have this debate going on in your head, you should already know that you need to make the fire.
Yep, that's exactly right. My partner is Harvey McKay. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. His first book was Swim with the Sharks Without Getting Eaten Alive. And he's, I think, a 6-time New York best-selling author. And one thing he always says is, how do you know when it's time to fire somebody? And this is what you just said. First time you think about it.
Yeah, and certainly the first time you tell your wife or your significant other. I think a lot of the time when you talk to your confidants about an individual, that's when the internal struggle is already bubbling. So it's bubbling at such a high rate that you have to share it with somebody, that you have to get it off your chest. That's when you really need to act.
Yep, that's exactly right. Well, as far as I'm concerned, culture is everything. Culture makes or breaks companies. Too few CEOs pay attention. They think culture is just a squishy free beer and pizza for lunch stuff, and it's really not. I mean, you look at the culture, toxic culture in Wells Fargo is just a great example. I mean, that's a gift that keeps on giving. I must get 3 calls from media outlets a week to comment on something that they've done that's stupid, and they all try to reach for a policy problem or a policy lever, and it's never the policy. It's always the culture is the problem.
Yeah, I met John Stumpf before the accounting scandal went public. We had dinner just a little bit before it went public. And I remember talking to him over dinner, and I asked him a couple questions about what they were doing in fintech and with all these technology companies that are going after the major banks. And he told me that he thought it was a huge priority, that it was an incredible priority for them to stay ahead of the technology trends and to stay ahead of these disruptive companies that were going after the financial services market. And I asked him a follow-up question. I asked him, so how much time do you, if it's such a high priority, how much time do you personally spend per week working on programs around innovation and disruption? And he paused for a full 10 seconds before he kind of lowered his head and said, not as much time as you think. The reality is, because I sell software, I've been selling software to large companies for the last couple decades, and the world's biggest companies like Apple and Facebook and Walmart and Bank of America and Wells Fargo and United Airlines. These are all companies that use my software products. And so I've worked with them on their innovation programs. And I know that very few executives at the top spend any time on these programs. So I already assumed that it was low, but it was interesting to see it reflected in his face, to hear him admit that after first starting with the premise that yes, it's very important, and then no, I don't spend any time on innovation personally. And I think that's really the problem that's facing CEOs in a lot of the legacy companies across all these long-standing industries that we have today.
I couldn't agree more. What tends to happen is CEOs throw out an edict, and then they expect it to happen, and they'll plug back in a month and see if anything went on, and they have to personally be involved. I can tell you that as a legacy company, the company that I run was completely old-line legacy, what I call dumb metal and plastic products, and I morphed that completely into high-technology life safety systems. But I didn't just say, guys, we're going to do this, so get on with it, and, talk to me once in a while when it's done. I personally spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on it. Even now, today, once a week, I have the entire technology and marketing team together on a phone call from wherever they are in the world, every Friday morning for 2 hours, and you got to put your time where your mouth is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important today for CEOs to focus on the products and the technologies that will take command of their industries over the next, 1, 2, 5, 10 years. And I think a lot of CEOs of large organizations like John Stumpf would sit back and say, well, I hire great teams and I can't afford to be in the weeds down at the technology or software level. But the reality is, if you look at the CEOs of the world's biggest companies today, if you look at Jeff Bezos, who micromanages everything down to the last pixel on the Amazon website, or you look at somebody like Elon Musk, who writes on Reddit that he spends 80% of his time on engineering. These product CEOs, they spend an incredible amount of time focusing on the seeds of the future. I call it seeds versus weeds, and it's understanding how technology is forming this incredible lever arm that can displace industries and change the world. And you have to invent the products that are going to win the future of your industry.
That's great advice. I couldn't agree with that more. The problem that a lot of CEOs have, particularly in public companies, but any company, is, these pesky shareholders really don't want to invest in the future. They just want to get their dividends today. Yeah,
I totally agree. And I think if you use Silicon Valley as a mirror to these large companies, you can really see how different it is. Generally, in Silicon Valley, you have these product trinity CEOs who at least some part of their job, they'll actually be the CTO and the product manager and the head of user experience design. They'll focus on those activities. They might have heads of state for each of those functions, but they'll focus on those activities on a regular basis. They also have boards that are all growth-minded and all high-tech, all with high-tech experience. And then they'll have investors that are obviously growth-minded and purposely investing in high technology. But companies need to make sure they have the right CEOs, the right leadership. They need to have the right boards, and they need the right investors who understand what's happening to the world, who understand the lever arm that's forming in technology.
Yeah.
That takes quite a bit of work, but I think that's a lens by which companies around the world really can look at where they are and whether they're set up for failure or success in the digital era.
Well, yeah, I guess that would be the key. So many legacy product CEOs are saddled with boards that have legacy mindsets, and they just want to know that everything's going to be fine. And when you tell them that I've been down this road, so I know, when you tell them, guys, everything is not going to be fine unless we do some pretty radical transformation here into the future, they just don't want to hear that.
Absolutely. And companies like Amazon, they've done, Jeff Bezos has done an incredible job maintaining an institutional shareholder base that is very pro-growth for the huge duration and scale of their organization. And so companies really need to fight for that. In his first shareholder letter to investors, he wrote, this is a company that's going to focus on growth. We're going to make experiments. We're not going to focus on the short term. And he's maintained that investor base. And so there are a lot of elements you have to get right, but it definitely includes investors and boards and leadership.
Yep. Well, listen, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I can imagine how busy you are. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak to me.
Yeah, thank you as well. Let me know if you ever get down to the Southern California area. I've got a house. I live in Newport Beach these days, but it'd be great to meet in person sometime.
I would love to do that. In fact, I'll make a point of it. I do get to California. See if we can get together. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much.
You've been listening to Transform, Ignite, Disrupt. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit StephenLBlue.com.